Hello and welcome to another episode of the Peru Channel Podcast. I'm your host, Philip, and this week I'm going to talk about the most popular topic that comes up on social media for people planning trips to Peru. And that, of course, is Machu Picchu. Even for a single person traveling alone, a trip to Machu Picchu is not cheap. For a large family, it could easily cost thousands of dollars depending on where they've traveled from and the level of comfort that they're willing to pay for. In this episode, I'm going to cover some of the more common questions that often come up for people planning a trip to Machu Picchu. There's simply no way I'm going to cover everything in one episode, so there will be other episodes to cover all the questions that come up. Why would you listen to me about Machu Picchu when there are literally hundreds of YouTube videos, Facebook pages, and blogs full of information? Well, that's easy because not one of them is even close to the experience I have visiting Machu Picchu. One of the reasons I started this podcast was because I was frustrated with the information presented by usually well-meaning people who wanted to, quote, tell you everything you need to know, even though they only went there once and maybe just for a few hours. Some are clearly trying to get you to watch their video or read their ad-filled blog so they can make money with clickbait titles, but the truth is, I've never read a single one of those that are really accurate. While they tell you about their experiences, they don't even come close to covering all the information that's available. Some fill in the gaps with information they found somewhere on social media or learned from their guides, which is frequently wrong. Many provide old information as things constantly change, and a video from a year ago probably won't be able to tell you what it's like now. I've been to Machu Picchu itself somewhere around 70 times and traveled to the surrounding sanctuary an additional dozens and dozens of times. I've been places that regular visitors aren't allowed to go and have explored in the surrounding jungle looking for, and sometimes finding, forgotten Inca sites buried in the rainforest. I'm the only person who goes there many times a year and doesn't actually go up to the main Machu Picchu site every time. I won't talk about things I haven't done, like walking the famous Inca Trail route, although I can talk about reputable agencies and the experiences I've had with their personnel. I won't talk about expensive first-class railroad cars, as they're simply not worth it for me to even try. Of course, if you want to pay for my trip so I can check it out in advance for you, just let me know and we could probably work something out. Okay, enough of that. Let's get started with today's episode. The first question that I hear all the time, and one that I talk about a lot too on social media, is, are guides required to enter Machu Picchu? Well, the answer is a simple no. Some guides who work the bus lines in Aguascalientes try to tell people that they can't get in unless they're accompanied by a guide, but that's 100% a lie. And sadly, they know it, yet many continue to use it to try to get clients. The rules for Machu Picchu are, of course, publicly posted and available for anyone to see on the site's official website. Section 17.1 of the regulations states that it is recommended that they be accompanied by a tour guide to contribute to the conservation of cultural heritage and planning of the tourist visit. Though it wasn't enforced, the wording before said that visitors must be accompanied by a guide, but that has clearly not been the case for nearly 6 years and wasn't really enforced before. There was talk a few months ago of going back to the requirement for guides, but nothing has been mentioned since. The guides themselves push hard for this, of course, so they can make more money. It wouldn't be bad if so many of the guides weren't unprofessional, dishonest, and frankly lacking in basic knowledge about Machu Picchu. The best guides are always associated with major agencies outside of Aguascalientes. The worst are the unofficial guides who operate out of Cusco without any kind of licensing or control by pushing themselves and trying to get clients on social media, especially in Facebook groups, by going after every person who even mentions the words Machu Picchu. There's dozens and dozens of guides in Aguascalientes who patrol the bus lines of people waiting to catch a ride up to the site. I call them piranhas because they swim around looking for unsuspecting victims onto whom they can pounce. If you're waiting in line for a bus and don't have a guide, you can expect to be approached over and over and over with the same sales pitches of why you need a guide. Sometimes they'll even lie to you and tell you that a guide is required. I've had it happen to me, and they are visibly angry when I tell them that they're lying and cite the specific regulation. Uh, Trust me, they know the rules. I've even got a copy now on my cell phone so I can show them, but I really doubt that any of them are going to wait around to look at it because they know the rules. In all of my visits to Machu Picchu, I've heard less than 5 guides who appear to be really knowledgeable about Machu Picchu. Many cite mythology that has no basis in fact or is even proven to be factually wrong. The one thing that most are really good at is learning quickly what their clients want to hear and being ready to tell them just about anything so they'll get a bigger tip. During the pandemic, when there were very few visitors to Machu Picchu, they told wild stories about things like human sacrifices in the Sacred Plaza, or that Machu Picchu was a university, or even that it was an Inca version of a bed and breakfast lodge. I'm not kidding. Several confirmed to me that they actually made up these lies and shared them amongst themselves while sitting around waiting for tourists to show up in Aguascalientes. The whole point was to make Machu Picchu sound even more fantastic than it already is, again, so they would get bigger tips. Another trick that they do is rush their clients through the site quickly so they can return to the entrance or back to the bus lines to get another group. I've seen them more times than not deliberately miss the best places for photos, skip past some of the most important parts of the site, and do everything they can to get the group through quickly so they can possibly have as many as 3 groups each day. If you're with a guide around 10 or 10:30 in the morning from Aguascalientes, I can almost guarantee that they're going to rush you through so they can get back down the mountain in time for the first rush of trains that arrive between 11 and 12. For me, it's easy to tell the ones who come from Cusco because they take their time and never seem to be in a hurry. I've spoken to many of the staff at Machu Picchu before, and the problem with guides is something that really frustrates them. But they can't do much about it. They're very aware of the general lack of knowledge about the site and the misinformation shared, and they try to educate them, but they only have minimal control over the guides. If you're coming with a group pre-organized, there's a good chance that you'll have a professional and knowledgeable guide. I strongly recommend that for everyone, the best thing you can do is study and learn before you get to Machu Picchu. The only real guidebook still is Ruth Wright's Machu Picchu Guidebook, a self-guided tour available on Amazon. Ms. Wright and her husband did extensive research at the site along with archaeologists from Machu Picchu, and her book is far and away the only one worth getting if you want to know the site. There's a link in the show notes where you can buy a copy for $23, or at least that's what it was at the time of this podcast. It's small enough to carry in your backpack, and you can read it as you're traveling before you get to Machu Picchu, and even use it as a resource when you're there. YouTube videos are great to see what Machu Picchu is like, but they're notorious for providing lots of misinformation too. Usually, again, it's clear that well-meaning people are just repeating false information they heard from guides that they trusted. There's a handful of really good ones, though, published by reputable sources like the History Channel. I'll also put a link to them in the show notes. Something else that always comes up is, how do you get tickets to Machu Picchu? And even more commonly, when should you buy them? Well, there was a lot of controversy about ticket sales a few months ago. It turned out that there apparently was a good bit of under-the-table illegal ticket distribution and sales going on, for which some people may eventually spend some time in prison. As far as I know, investigations are still going on. I remember hearing some people say that, I know where I can get tickets anytime, even at the last minute. Well, that was illegal because tickets were not available, and apparently there was a kind of under-the-table mafia plan going on, for lack of a better phrase to describe it. And people were hoarding tickets, buying them in huge numbers, and then selling them at an inflated price. One way to get your ticket is to just let someone like a guide or an agency buy them for you, which generally is not a bad idea if they don't charge you a super high commission, which some of the disreputable people that I talked about earlier will occasionally do. But reputable agencies and guides won't mind buying the tickets for you for a small commission. For you to buy your own tickets, there are only 3 ways that you can get them. One is buying them in person at the ticket office on Calle Garcilaso in Cusco, between the Plaza de Armas and the Plaza San Francisco. Unless you're in Cusco for a long time, though, the odds of any being available for tourists is almost non-existent, even in the slow season. It's mostly used by those agencies which buy tickets for customers who have prepaid. Most everyone who wants to get their own ticket gets them from the official online site at tuboleta.cultura.pe. That's tuboleta.cultra.pe. Right now, this redirects you to a commercial site called Join Us, but this is scheduled to be changed when a new government-run website comes online. There's really little information available right now about what's coming, but I wouldn't be surprised if they still use this tuboleta.cultura.pe web address to link to the new site. When more is known, I'll write about it on the PeruChannel.com website, the same website where I host the show notes. If you need tickets for a specific date, or you come at the last minute and there are no tickets available for that date and or time that you want to visit the site, there is one more possibility that's actually not bad, but you have to keep in mind that you're still taking a chance. Each day, there are 1,000 tickets set aside to be purchased in Aguascalientes. They can be purchased the previous day in Aguascalientes at the Cultural Center next to the village's Plaza de Armas. It's really easy to find, and you can ask anyone where it is because most people in Aguascalientes who are working in tourism speak English very well. There still is the catch that if you're not there early, you may not get the time that you want for the following day, but so far I've heard no complaints of that happening. It certainly could change when things get busier in the coming months as tourism finally is expected to rebound after 4 years of COVID pandemic and social unrest. The one requirement is that you're going to have to spend a night in Aguascalientes, as the tickets available are only for the following day. This was done to pacify the protesting tourism industry who wanted more people to stay in their small village. The good thing is that Aguascalientes is really not a bad place to spend a little extra time. The restaurants are good and there's a lot to see there besides Machu Picchu to keep you busy. For many visitors, it's also a time to do a little exploring in the surrounding rainforest, since most people don't realize until they get there that Machu Picchu is actually located in the high jungle. How about getting from Aguascalientes to Machu Picchu? You really only have two options. You either take a bus, which costs foreigners $24, or you can take the 1.5 to 2 hour hike up the mountain on the steep winding trail. If you're really in good shape, you can probably make it a little bit faster, but it is a tough, steep climb. The buses themselves are extremely safe and there are simply never any accidents, even though people who don't like hikes should sit on the aisle seats and not look out the window. The views, weather permitting, are spectacular across the mountains, which seem to rise straight up from the Rio Urubamba below, but it can be a little disconcerting for people who have a fear of heights. The walk up the mountain is, to say the least, very challenging for most. It's made even worse because there are very few scenic views as it passes through the dense rainforest almost the entire way. I've done it twice. It took a couple of years to forget how much I hated it the first time before I did it again, but I still haven't forgotten since, and I have no intention to ever do it again. There is the option to walk along the winding bus road if you want, instead of taking the trail, but that could take you several hours to get to the top. The steps on the walking trail tend to get higher about 2/3 of the way up to the top, which is really frustrating because that's when you're most tired. Also, morning dew and even rain can make the stone steps slippery, so you have to go slow and use caution. Lastly, what about taking a train if you're one of the 90 to 95% of the visitors who go to Machu Picchu that way? There's really only 3 options. The first probably won't apply to most listening to this, as it's called the tren local, or the local train. It's a heavily subsidized service that is basically a bus from Ollantaytambo to Aguascalientes and onto the hydroelectric power station about 12 kilometers on the other side of the mountain. But to be honest, I've never seen anyone other than locals going farther on that route to the end of the line. The cost for the tren local is 24 soles, or about $6.50 round trip. And that's what it costs for people from Cusco, and the cost is even less for people who live along the way, where the train makes several stops to allow locals to get on and off. It also carries cargo back and forth, supplying Aguascalientes, which frankly has no other way to access the outside world. Tourists have two options: the Peru Rail and the Inca Rail train companies. Peru Rail offers more options leaving from Cusco, Paroy, which is a small town not far from Cusco, and Ollantaytambo. Both companies have options ranging from basic with comfortable seating and tables to luxury first-class cars. I used Peru Rail a lot during the early months of the pandemic because they had huge discounts to get people to ride the tourist trains, and I rarely had any issues, maybe once or twice little things. Though it certainly helped that I got to know most of the staff at that time since there were far fewer cars on each trip. In fact, I remember one day, just to share a quick little story, when I was returning back from Aguascalientes to Ollantaytambo. I had gotten on the train, had a ticket for the tourist train in the busiest time of the day when most people are returning from a midday trip to Machu Picchu. It was March when the crowds are usually starting to pick up. I was pretty shocked because there was only one car attached to the engine, and when the train pulled out from the station, I realized I was the only passenger in the entire train car, meaning I was the only passenger on the entire train that afternoon. I haven't ridden Inca Rail before, but I'm going to travel on their 360-degree train in a few days. I'm looking forward to it because they offer a car with open-air windows running along both sides of the car, along with normal seating in an attached car. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the weather will cooperate so I can do a lot of filming along the route without having to shoot out of glass train windows. I have a lot of friends, especially Peruvians, who just won't travel on anything else except for Inca Rail, and every single one has nothing but good things to say about it. So I'm looking forward to it, and I have no doubts that it's going to be a very pleasant experience. Peru Rail has something called their observatory car service, which also has a separate car that's open, but it only has a balcony off the back. While it provides some spectacular views and wonderful windows along the length of the car, the balcony is in demand for photos, so there's often far less opportunities to just stand out there and enjoy the view like you would hope to be able to do. The Peru Rail Observatory balcony car is also the last car on the train, so on the trip to Machu Picchu, there are some amazing views with nothing between you and the surrounding landscape. The problem is that for some reason they don't turn the car around, and on the way back to Ollantaytambo, it's the first car, and the balcony faces the back of the engine, making it nearly worthless. There's just nothing but a lot of extremely loud noise and lots of diesel smoke. Frankly, I would never, ever pay to use that service in that direction. Fortunately, both companies allow you to mix and match whatever level of service and type of rail car that you want in any direction, allowing you to save money. For instance, if you're coming back from Machu Picchu at night after dark and you just want to sleep, get the cheapest car that's available so you can save money and take a nap. Their websites are really easy to navigate in both English and Spanish, and they have lots and lots of information. One thing that you should remember is that both have luggage limits based on space limitations on the trains. Both don't allow normally more than a medium-sized backpack, but Peru Rail has always been a little more lenient. There's a place to put your packs or bags behind the seats, but these are limited. Check the websites for specific details on this. Also keep in mind that there is no passenger service from Cusco to Machu Picchu between January 1st and April 30th on the trains because this route passes through a canyon during the second half that, while it's beautiful, is also prone to landslides that can block the tracks. What each rail company does during that time is they provide what they call a bimodal service, in which you take a nice, comfortable bus from Cusco to Ollantaytambo, where you'll board the train. Inca Rail's buses depart from their office on Avenida El Sol, while Peru Rail departs from their train station about 10 minutes south of the center of town. The bimodal service operates also at any time of the year, and you can also buy tickets just from Ollanta to Aguascalientes. But from May through December, I strongly recommend the trains going from Cusco to Machu Picchu, as this route is incredibly beautiful. There's probably going to be time to buy something to eat or drink at the Ollantaytambo station. The prices inside the waiting room snack shop are outrageously high. In fact, they are so high it makes airport snack shops look cheap. But there's another little place next to the hotel restaurant that faces the train tracks. I can't remember the name of it, but they have some of the best snacks and coffee that you can find. My friend Beto is there most mornings, and he can get you some brownies with huge chunks of chocolate. I usually buy them for my friends in Aguas Calientes every time. Or maybe he'll have time to warm up my personal favorite, the cinnamon rolls, which are it's making my mouth water just thinking about it right now. Well, there's a lot more I will talk about regarding Machu Picchu in the future, as this just scratches the surface of all the questions I hear. I already have a lengthy list of topics to cover in future episodes, but you can also get a ton of information from the Machu Picchu destination page on the PeruChannel.com website by following the link on the show notes page. If you like this and you've got something useful from it, please consider sharing it with others who may be interested in Peru, as it lets me know that I'm not wasting my time. The one thing that makes all this worthwhile is knowing that people are listening and that it's useful. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, there's a place at the end of the show notes page. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you in Peru soon.